Hey there, podcast listeners. A re-release today of an episode that I did with great operator Danny Bishop about a year and a half ago. Reason we're re-releasing is because Danny was just the recipient of the Operators Award for feature film from the BSC for his amazing work on Ballad of a Small Player, which is on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. He's an amazing operator, an amazing person, and a good friend. So enjoy the episode. Thanks. On today's episode, we'll talk about not jumping up before you are ready, All Quiet on the Western Front, Tar, The Stable Eye, and of course, traveling around the world with Jack Osborne. Just a little bit of business before we start. There may be a curse word here or there in this episode, so please listen responsibly. As always, our website, theop.io, is up and chock full of tips, tricks, and gooey operator goodness. Make sure to check out The Breakdown, where the best operators in the biz explain shots they have done, The Musings, where we discuss everything from quick tips to larger concepts of storytelling, the answers, the images, and so much more. I may or I may not take a break or two during this episode, but I promise that none of them will be longer than 22 seconds.
Hey everybody, Danny Brown here, creator of the Knuckle Puck, and we at Knuckle Puck Camera are proud supporters of this episode of The Op. The Knuckle Puck is a camera accessory loved by operators and camera assistants alike that allows the operator to pan and tilt with precision and ease. Check it out at knucklepuckcamera.com and make sure to follow us on Instagram at knucklepuckcamera.
Finally, if you are enjoying the podcast, please follow us, write a review, share us with your parents, and talk us up around the water cooler with your friends. So grab a beverage, sit back, and enjoy The Op. Thanks for listening.
Lock it up, nice and quiet, and let's roll.
Rolling. Victor 30 Echo, take 2.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
And camera set. And action.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Op, the podcast where we talk about operating and the art of visual storytelling. I'm Dave Comides, your host, and we are coming to you today over the interwebs, this phenomena that the kids seem to like, so we're going to see how it works, because my guest today is all the way over in England, so it wasn't really possible for us to sit down together. Daniel Bishop is a phenomenal operator who I actually met just last year, but we've become friends in that time. A couple of things that he has worked on, but not a complete list by any. All Quiet on the Western Front, which won, I think, the Academy Award and the BSC Award for cinematography last year, and he won the SOC Operator of the Year Award and the, the BSC Operator Award last year for it. He did the movie Tar with Todd Field, which was amazing. TV show Your Honor, where he worked with our mutual friend John Lindley, which he also won a BSC Operator of the Year Award. John Wick 3, Black Mirror, Sherlock, Doctor Who. He's been nominated for 2 other awards. He's just, every time I talk to him, he's doing something more impressive. It's kind of amazing. And it's just very cool to have you here, Danny. Thank you very much for being here. Being there.
Thank you. Thank you. It's funny sitting here and listening to an intro.
Everybody says that. It's like, wait, that's a lot of stuff. You've done some amazing movies.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny, isn't it? Because it's your the center of your own universe, you don't really think about it, and it's funny when you hear it listed like that. You realize it's actually spanned over a great deal of time. I was just trying to think about how I decide. I always think when someone asks me, how did I want to become a camera operator? What was it? And I was just thinking, I've got 2 children now, and they're 9 and 6, and they're both I tried to sit down and do art with them, painting and drawing, and I know that I think back to that time when I was a child, and I'm not very good at drawing, but artistically, I think my brain is an artistic brain, but I never could put it into my hands. And I think when I went to school didn't suit me or my personality or my behavior, and I really struggled with being academic. And when I think of how I am with my children now, I remember when I just before I started university, I got into photography, and I think that's kind of where it stemmed from me, that it was a natural progression from running around with a 35mm camera to suddenly being given a video camera where you could record people moving and walking and talking. And I think that although I love photography and I love doing photography and I love being in the darkroom, there was just nothing quite as exciting as as like filming somebody and telling stories, whether that's in television or whether that's in television or doing drama. So my
Did you?
background to becoming that was how I became a camera operator, because I couldn't paint or I couldn't do art. I couldn't do anything like that. And I could take photos. I could take nice pictures, basically.
It's funny because we're very similar. Because my daughter is, well, actually, both of my daughters are amazing artists, but one of them is studying art, and I would kill to be able to look at something and sit down and draw it. And
Yeah.
I can do that, but then when you look at what I drew, it's nothing like what you're looking at. And I'm the same way. It's like I sort of look at the camera as like it was my last hope for being able to do something artistic, because I can't do anything else. That's for sure. Did you go to school for camera work or cinematography, or was that a part of the deal?
I think that I genuinely believe that when I went to uni, I don't know, I can't talk for in America, but in the UK, it was right on the tipping point of where I think it was still quite elitist to work in the film industry. And it was elitist to be in the camera department. And the film schools and the film schools weren't really set up here. And there were lots of we call them media courses. And they weren't necessarily they weren't like what I would say film school. They were more like you would go there and get like a mixed education that wasn't really film, wasn't really TV. You weren't really sure what you were getting out of it. And there were lots of those. And I do feel like I've been doing some guest lecturing at my local uni, at my local college, and I can see the difference in 20 years is that it's being aimed at a broader spectrum of class. And I see that within the organizations as well, and certainly on just being on the floor. I think it's very different from when I was at uni, and I feel like I went to college and had an amazing 3 years, but when I came out, I probably could have learned that in about 2 weeks with a good operator. If I'd have stood beside yourself for 2 weeks, I probably could have learned all of that and then gone on to be in the camera department. So I don't think I would change anything, because it was like the start of my adulthood. But in terms of purely what I learned, I think that I could have done things differently. I think it's one of the main questions I always get asked when I talk to young people: should I go to college or should I start working? And I think that you have to tailor that to yourself. Some people have never left home, and going to university is a great stopgap because they get to have 3 years of becoming an adult, and that's just as good as the education. So I think it's a really difficult one to sit here and say to anyone. You can't sit to a classroom of 30 students and say you should go to film school or you should go and work as a camera trainee. It's so specific to you as a person and your behavior and how old you feel, whether you're a young 18-year-old or an old 18-year-old. And I think for me, it was great because I went away and grew up for 3 years, and I think I probably needed that.
Well, I think at the end of the day, what I always tell people is, come back to me in 20 years and I can tell you whether you made the right decision or not. But you're right. There's absolutely no way. And even that, like I talked to my kid, I don't know about what it's like in England, but there's a whole thing about going to the right college and which, I've gotten to 3 and which one is the right. And I always say to them, look, there's so much stuff that you don't know. Like you don't know who your roommate's going to be, who's going to have like who's going to have the idea for Facebook that you're going to become part of. I mean, you have no idea who you're going to meet and whatever. So hindsight's 2020. But so did you get out of university and go straight into the film industry, or like was that an avenue?
So my career, which always makes me sound like a dinosaur, when I moved to London, and there was this book called The Producer's Book, and this was at the beginning of the internet, which is why you sound like a dinosaur. And I basically
right?
sat and emailed like 200-300 people because their emails were in the book. I mean, you would never get it anymore. You know, I have direct access to all these emails, and I luckily I got a response from one person, and I went and met him, and we have an expression in England. I don't know if you have it, where you say "spit and sawdust," which is when somebody's like salt of the earth, like they're like a core, like roots person.
Yeah.
And I met this guy, and he was just like classic Londoner, spit and sawdust, like a bit of a geezer. And he was like, "Yeah, Danny, I haven't got the project for you at the moment." This is how he spoke. And he goes, "But when I've got one, I'll give you a call." And I'd done nothing. I'd literally done nothing. And I think that he just liked me. And a year later, I got a phone call from him, and he was like, "Right, I've got a job in Slovenia," because he used to do all like these adventure shows. So I got my friend, who's now a director. We hired an old digital SX camera, and I bought the manual for like HD cameras, and she spent 2 days with me going through the controls on the camera and what they did, how you did a white balance. And I was like, oh my God, right, okay. And then before I know it, I'm up a mountain in Slovenia with 4 celebrities. And I'm just like, how have I ended up here? And I'd done corporate videos, and I'd done like hairdresser videos and weddings, but now suddenly I'm up a mountain with a HD camera. Oh
Yeah.
no, I think it was a standard def camera. Sorry, it's not even HD yet. And my wife always laughs, and she always recounts the story, because they'd given me a matte box and filters that I hadn't requested, but the rental house had given us to it. And I was up this mountain, and I had an ND filter, and I remember going, "What the hell does this do? Like,
Why is it so dark?
why is it so dark?" And I held it up, and I thought, I wonder if the black like will go onto the tape. And
Wait, but were you the operator or the director of
yeah, I was
photography,
the
or
main camera operator.
you make camera operator?
Yeah, it's a great story, isn't it? I was like, and so
What
then
was
so
it?
then I
What was it?
knew.
It was this is a TV show, or what
Yeah,
was
it's a
it?
TV show, like a
Okay.
celebrities go and do a load of like stunts and things. And
Oh, okay. It's,
there was me and another girl, and she had like a PD
uh-huh.
150.
Okay.
And I remember we filmed all day in the rain, and that night, and then I looked down at the camera, and I realized I had there's like I'm sure you know, there was a wheel that you twisted for tungsten or daylight, and I'd
Oh,
shot all day on tungsten. So I was like, oh my God. So that night I was in the tent on the side of a mountain, literally in tears, thinking,
oh,
oh my God.
geez.
I was thinking, God, they're gonna fire me, they're gonna hate me. Anyway, I didn't know. For the rest of the 10 days I carried on filming, and I didn't know that they would just get it in the edit suite and just tweak it and take the blue out. Like I
Yeah, exactly.
didn't even know that was a thing.
So
So
you didn't tell anybody. You just kept quiet about it.
just kept quiet, keep calm and carry
Nice.
on, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yep. Yep.
then
Yep.
basically, for whatever reason, I think he liked my mojo, and then he said, right, I've got another. We're going to the next one. We're going to India. It's the next one I know. I'm in the foothills of the Himalaya, and we've climbed to like 15,000 feet, and we spent 8 weeks filming in the foothill of the Himalaya with all these
Oh
celebrities.
my gosh.
And then the next thing, he's like, right, we're off to Peru. So then I went out and I filmed an ayahuasca ceremony in the Amazon.
Oh my gosh.
So I had this like crazy like steps. But I think, it's like it all goes down to what I always say to people. People just want to work with nice people. And if you sat me down and said to me, what is your trait as a person? I would hope that is what people would say, and that is what I've always strived to be. Yeah, I lose my temper sometimes, and I can be annoying or whatever. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I think ultimately on those jobs, they just enjoyed me being around me, and I, I never moan or just get on with work. And like, I knew it was a privilege to be in Peru because a year before I'd been filming wedding videos. Now I'm in
Yeah.
Peru, and there was an older cameraman, a camera operator that I took over from, and he was a miserable git. And I just thought, what are you joking? Like, what a job! Like, there are people working in a pizza restaurant, and we're in Peru. Like,
Yeah.
it's a no brainer.
Yeah.
So they ended up getting rid of him, and I basically took over from him in this company. And then I worked. The next thing I did was with Jack Osborne, Ozzy Osbourne's son, and
Uh-huh.
he basically was becoming sober, and he was fat, and he wanted to lose weight. And for the next 4 years, I shot this show with him every year, where we travelled the globe doing crazy stuff. And
Wow.
I think in the second series, I think we went around the globe 3 times. And
Oh,
when I
that's
say
unbelievable.
I've filmed everywhere, filmed literally in most countries and most continents, in all continents, North Pole, South Pole, literally just everywhere. And that was my bread and butter. Then I was just known for doing crazy, and I still think about it now because we didn't have GoPros, and we didn't have like, what I would have to have a little drone back then, or to have a little GoPro. We had, they were like lipstick pencil cameras that were like about
Yeah.
this big,
Yeah.
like that shape, and then they had a wire, and then they'd go down to a little camera, and it was so the type of filming that we did just was it was a nightmare. And now I see all the stuff that I could have used back then, and it would have been great.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I did that then I did that from around 2003 to 2008. And I think about it all the time, because I know that the one thing that kind of work made me, is my reaction as a camera operator. And everybody does things differently. And I've never used a viewfinder, not in the last 5 years. I always have a monitor on the camera. And that's because my style of operating is I'm just looking around the whole time. I'm not distracted. I'm not out of the zone. I'm very much in the zone with an actor. But my operating style when I was doing like all those things around the world was I'd always have one eye open, because because it's single. I was shooting single camera on everything, and
Yeah.
I'm following the action. And you've got 4 people talking. I'm having to pan between 4 people. And I think the other thing as well that helped is I understood about editing. I would know that if I'm filming 4 celebrities, I would need a wide, a 2 shot, and 2 singles, and I'd probably have to get them to repeat a couple of questions. And I think it was a good period of time in my youth where it was a lot of single camera work. I was thinking on my feet, and I don't think I realized how much I was learning about camera operating, even though I was.
Uh-huh.
And I think now, when I work with Ed, one of the things that Ed's always said to me is that he likes my handheld camera work. Ed is in the director from All Quiet, and
I was going to ask you. Yeah.
and
Okay.
and every time he says it to me, I always I think it's because I started in documentaries, and I did so
Yeah.
much handheld work, probably like 6 or 7 years of constant on the road. Oh my God, there's something, throw the camera on the shoulder, get a shot. And I think that's where that style's from. And I've always thought that whenever anyone's ever said to me, "Oh, I like your handheld work," and I think that's where it came from. So I was quite lucky. Um, and then I got to 2000. I did a Steadicam. I did a Steadicam masterclass in Philadelphia with Garrett, which I've talked to you about before, but I could literally sit here and talk about it all night. I went there for a week. I felt like, yeah, I can do a Steadicam course in the UK, but I wanted to go out and be immersed in it, and I wanted to go with people. I felt, obviously this is now nearly 20 years ago, so it wasn't that long since Garrett had invented it. it's still quite fresh, even though 2004, you know, it felt like it was something that had just been invented, the Steadicam, even though it
Yeah.
had some good use. And I was like, "What? I'm going to go out there with Garrett, with Garrett and Jerry and Larry McConkey." And I went out there and I did my course, and it was just the most exciting week and the most thrilling week.
That's an incredible
And
group of people to learn from: Garrett Brown, Jerry Holloway, and Larry McConkey.
I
You
know,
can't
yeah.
get much better than that.
And then at night time we would be sat down and they would just be talking about Carlito's Way. And what was really funny was I did a masterclass this year, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to show you this clip from Carlito's Way," and I hadn't realized. I watched the clip and I was like, "Oh my god, like that is what I do." Like, and I realized that I remember, like, I remember being in the room with the three of them talking about operating in Steadicam,
Yeah.
and you could see the way, like, um, he's so in sync on Carlito's Way, uh, following following Al Pacino around, and you could see like he's so in sync. And using Al Pacino to move the camera. And that's what I was trying to explain to the operators. I was like, when I shot All Quiet, I spent so much of my mind work is making the camera moves invisible. And then when I
Yep.
watched the camera move with Al Pacino, like Al Pacino moves and it's helping the camera move. And
Yeah.
I remember mentioning in my speech when I won the award, I remember mentioning, like, thinking back to how much I had learnt in that 1 week with them. And I can look back now and I really realized that I did. And I think that just goes back to showing you how important it is to do these courses and go and listen to people. And, all these people have been doing it for such a long time, which is obviously like now where I am. And it's like, you want to hear what they've got to say. And I kind of lingered on their every word.
That group especially has so much
Yeah,
to say, and I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, I would suggest you see it if you have. But anybody else who's listening, on the website at theop.io, I have something called the breakdown, where the operators break down shots. And the first one that Larry did for me, which is up, and by the time this comes out, many more will be up from him, was Carlito's Way. But the best part of it is that he still had, or someone else I think had, the video tap recording where you can hear Larry and Brian De Palma cueing Al Pacino.
right.
And one of the cool things that you were talking about that made me think of is, there's that point where Al Pacino goes around the corner and is about to go down the escalator, and he realizes the bad guys are there, and then he backs up and
Yeah,
moves off, and Larry has to go off him. So Larry said to him early on, you're going to go much farther than you actually would in real life. You'd clearly see them and they would see you, but I can't tell that. And I need to get you deep enough to make it work. So if you're okay, let me cue you when you should double back. And Al said, sure. And sure enough, when you watch it with that in mind, you're like, he totally would have been seen by everybody. But because of where the camera is, you don't think
right.
about it for 2 seconds and it works perfectly. But it's that great thing, like you were saying, of Al Pacino is moving the camera. The camera is not moving according to Al Pacino, and that comes from, trust and understanding the physics of everything and all that stuff that we've learned all those years. But yeah, it's quite amazing.
I think there's a beautiful moment in it, which I played them over and over again to see if they would understand. And it's Al Pacino's on the left hand side of the frame, and you know that Al Pacino is going to go left, but you need to then put him on the right hand side of the frame. And the way he does it is Al Pacino clearly goes a tiny bit slower, and he pans a bit faster, and it's just the perfect amount of pan that doesn't make you realize that Al Pacino is going from the left to the right hand side of the frame.
Yeah.
And it seems like, when you've got him whizzing up and down escalators and, whip pans to a standstill and stuff like that. For me, it was like that moment, that is what shows you where the good operating is. because you haven't realized that the actor's gone from one side of the frame to the other, and that the pan has been slightly faster. And I thought about it so much, and I just think there's been so many instances where that has been emblazoned in my mind, and that kind of idea about working with the actor with the camera. And it's like, it's so simple that you wouldn't even notice it, but it's such an important moment.
There's no well, what it is he makes everything, and he makes everything in that shot and most of his career, to be perfectly honest, he makes it all look seamless, right?
Yeah,
And you doing what you do and me doing what I do, we watch it and we recognize how much design goes into it.
yeah,
But the key is to make it look like no design has gone into it at all, right? Which and I don't know if you do this, but when I'm setting shots up, to me, I often won't understand what the problem is. Like, well, actually, a good example is, we'll do a rehearsal, and the second AD will come up and say, "Hey, how was that cross in the doorway?" or something or other. And I've recognized over the years that if I can't think of what they're talking about, then it was perfect. But
yeah,
if something bumps, then I'm like, yeah, that was no good because I recognized it. He's got to be earlier or later or something. But it's
yeah,
that thing of, to me, it's like if I recognize it, it's probably a problem, and if I don't recognize it, then it must be working well,
yeah.
which is a
That's
weird
such a
way to
good.
do it.
It's such a good way of doing it. That's what, you're completely right. I feel the same way. If something's taken you out of the zone, you know that there's a problem, even if you don't know what it is. If something will catch your mind, won't it? And it will just take you out of the zone. That, yeah, you're completely right with that.
Well, because at the end of the day, you're there to tell the story. So if something takes you out of telling the story, then obviously it's problematic. And oftentimes it's funny because people try to like go, well, maybe if and I'm like, no, just get rid of it completely. Let's just move on because it's a problem, and we'll find other moments. But so when did you start doing? So it sounds like you were sort of, I mean, in this country, we'd call those things that you were talking about reality TV. I don't know if they call it that in Britain or
Yeah,
not, but
absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
so when did you make the jump to narrative?
So I was completely scared of Steadicam. So I felt like I could never get my head round. I always used to say to people, "Don't you find it heavy?" Like, and I was so scared of going onto a set and not being able to do the shot because it was too heavy, or not get it right, or obviously we didn't have stabilization, so I was worried I'd get the horizon off, and I was very much frightened of doing Steadicam.
Oh,
So I kind of put it on the back burner and carried on doing my reality TV. And then in 2008, I had done so much traveling the world that I was like, right, it's time. It is time to get into drama now. And in the way that just seems impossible to think about, I just got offered a film by somebody I knew, and it was a terrible film. The director took all the money. It had big actors in, but all of a sudden I was on the set with a 35mm camera, and I was like, and it was like the same thing. The same thing. I didn't really understand that if I took my eye away from the eyepiece, you know, all of those things that sound crazy. You
yeah.
just go, but I mean, everybody's got these stories, haven't they? And it's like, I didn't know, I didn't know. I think what I would take away from doing that first job on the 35mm now is, even now in my career, I just feel like I just pan and tilt a camera, and I don't know much about cameras. I couldn't sit there and go through the menu with you.
Oh no.
I struggled. I was in movie tech the other day, and I tried to change the filter wheel. I tried to change the ND on the S35, and I didn't have a clue. I was like, I just don't know how to do it. And
I
what
will
I
tell
would
you,
say,
if it makes you feel any better. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if it makes you feel any better. First of all, my assistants know if I'm doing a handheld that when they hand me the camera, every button is locked off and disabled,
right?
because they know
Yeah,
that invariably I'll like hit something and like batteries will fall out of the back or something will happen. And there are times when, just physically we won't be able to do something. And if the assistants know me, they'll call to my dolly grip and go, "Hey, can you drop an ND in?" Because they know
right. Yeah.
I'll mess it up. I'm the same way. I'm just like, I need the box with that makes the pictures, and I'll point that and do stuff with it. But the rest of it, I don't understand it, and I don't know that I want to, actually.
I will say that there is one that for me there is one logical reason as well why I've maintained that, because I can be quite erratic, and when I first started doing drama, I'd come from doing everything: set the sticks up, put the camera on, radio mics, pop a light up. So I was still in the world of let's all muck in, and obviously camera crews are quite they're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you touching that? Even to an operator, why are you touching that? And so I basically had to retrain myself, and I had to go. I had to go. Okay, the focus puller doesn't want me to touch the camera, and the grip doesn't want me to pick the track up. So instead of being helpful, just sit and wait until it's your moment. And even now, I struggle. Even now, I struggle to not get involved and help. But I think to myself, it's not my job. That person is paid to do that, and that is what they've chosen as a career. And
Yeah.
I will just stand here until. And so sometimes I'm like chomping at the bit to get on the camera, and I have to stand there and go, hey, I know this first AC is brilliant, and I know that when he's ready, he will tell me, and he's not mucking about. He's doing his job. And then like my first AC will be like, all right, camera's ready, and I'll go, right, okay. So I respect
Yeah.
that, and I definitely think that that's one of the reasons why I don't get involved with anything to do with cameras. And I was stood with James the other day because we're prepping on this film, and somebody started asking me about lenses, and I was like, I'm not the person to ask. Like, I can
I'm the
I
same
can
way.
I can tell you what I like and what looks beautiful, and I can tell you all the lenses I've worked with and some of my favorites. But if you really want me to sit here and start having a conversation with you about lenses, I can talk to you about camera movement, and I do think that that's quite healthy. I think that I think that it's our job. Our job is so has so many elements to it to keep the camera moving that it's also like my personality compartmentalizes and go, right, what do you need to know and what don't you need to know? And the things that you need to learn and the things that you need to be good at, learn them and do them well. And don't think that you need to be on set. Like, you're not the director. You don't need to know everyone's job and what they're doing. You need to do what
Yeah.
you're doing and do it well. And I
But
think that
do you also think that sometimes people get, I find that people get a little bit precious about the equipment, and it's like, the Aeroflex makes great cameras, and Sony makes great cameras and all these things, but if you have someone who doesn't know how to frame the story, or someone who doesn't know how to light so that it evokes an emotion or whatever, it doesn't make a difference what camera or what lens you're using. You're like, there are these cinematographers that I work with who are like, I've got these secret lenses, and it's just like, I'm sure they look beautiful, but do they make or break a story? At the end of the day, no, because it's what you do lighting, and I do framing, and the focus puller does pulling focus. And so that's my reason of sort of, my only pet peeve is I want an entire set of lenses. I don't like when I get on a show and there's like a huge gap between, like, there's like a 21 and a 40, and it's just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, no,
So that's
nightmare.
my only thing, is just give me the tools to be able to do what we're supposed to do, and the rest of it, I think you got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like, it's a nightmare when you get like a set of four or five lenses.
Yeah.
But I guess the most important bit at that time was that I met James, and I
James,
worked on
what's his last name?
James Friend.
Yeah.
And ultimately what happened was he needed a camera operator. He was just out of film school, and he loves the BSC, still loves the BSC. And he felt that he never wanted to operate, and he was like a young kid, and I was a young kid. And so very unconventionally, he started his career never operating as a camera. And that's quite an unconventional route in the UK, because over here on the lower budgets, the DOP always operates. It's either single camera and the DOP operates, or it's two cameras and the DOP will traditionally operate a camera. So I met James and started working with him in 2008, and we some years we would do like 5 or 6 movies a year, and we would finish a film, go straight onto another one, and they were all like £200,000 movies, straight to DVD, gangster movies. But we like the time of my life, we were young people, and we were just having fun and partying and working really hard and traveling around the world. And most importantly, which is my advice that I say to people now, is I made my mistakes where it didn't matter that I was making them. And the only people that knew I was making the mistakes were me. And some of the directors I worked with back then just didn't care. They just didn't care. And, they didn't care that when I panned, I didn't stop quite right, because all they could see was that the actor had done the shot. And I think the most important thing is that I was lucky enough to learn, and the thing that I did was I would always take note of mentally of the things I liked and the things that I didn't like, and sometimes the mistakes are the best things to learn, because you go, right, well, I didn't like that there because I was on that bit of equipment, so maybe I won't use that bit of equipment again. I use something else that does it differently. Or, okay, handheld. Oh yeah, I've learned that when I run with that handheld, I can't move very fast, so maybe I need to get a rickshaw. All those things that you couldn't do if you're on set in front of Idris Elba, but you can do when you're in front of some other actor, earning no money. And I think that was key in mine and James's development, that we came up through that time together, and we were just working and working and working and going from job to job and working together. And I think we ended up getting a bit sick of each other, because we ended up having actually having like a 3-year hiatus. And I went off and worked with some other DOPs. And I think it's interesting when you're used to working with the same people. It's also good to go and work with other people, because you just realize how, in a weird way, how formulaic you can become. Yeah. You realize if you work in the same situation, that you end up being like, oh well, I know this works, so I just do it that way. And so what I would say is, I worked on all these different tiered films, and I worked my way up, and then me and James did a show with Tim Roth called Rillington Place, which was like it's a serial killer, it's a true story. And I think that it was the first time that we'd got to the point where we were like shooting like drama like a film. And we shot we shot on the K35s, but we shot it nearly all on the 32mm. And really the whole 3 episodes are like a 3-hander or 2-hander maybe. Huh. And he/I won the BAFTA for cinematography. And it felt like that it was like the first time all that hard work had kind of come into the point where we were telling a story, but telling it well and working together as a team and being in that fantastic triangle that you don't know about until you're in that fantastic triangle with a director and a DOP.
Do you think you would have been as successful had you not gone away and sort of figured out how other people work and done all that and come back?
I definitely feel like I went and had a meeting with James in Shoreditch House, in a Soho house in East London, and we hadn't seen each other for 3 years. I didn't even end up going to his wedding, and because I think we had worked together so much. And he came and he was like, "Look, I think we should work together." And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I really miss working with you." And I think it was definitely a case of the heart, absent makes the heart go fonder. Yeah. I think like retrospectively now looking back at it, I think that it's um, we just overwork together like a band does, I guess. It's
Yeah.
why bands have people never understand it why bands have so much time off, but it's like when we were doing like 4 or 5 movies a year, and not only that, none of them were in the union, so sometimes we'd work 15, 16 hours a day, 5 days a week. um, and I think that it was like we went away and we came back and we went and did this thing called Rillington Place, and it was like so dark, and it was like it did really, really well. Critically, it did really, really well over here. And I think that was kind of when me and James obviously were like, okay, we've got this good relationship, and we've got a good style. And I think really from there, the main thing then was we went and did Patrick Melrose with Ed, which is where we met Edward Berger, who we would then go on to do Your Honour with and All Quiet. And Ed is just like the most charismatic German you'll ever meet, and super clever, very funny. And the one thing for me that I now know, looking back, if I can look back at myself, and I realised that I had gotten to the point of being an operator where quite often I was like the smartest person in the room, in the triangle with the DOP and the director. So if I hadn't been with James and I was working on another film or another drama at the level I was at, I was so confident and happy at work that maybe a director wouldn't know that what they were doing, and I'd be like, yeah, we just need to do this, 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 and this,
Hmm.
and and I was happy with that. That was great. Oh, I can go in. It's not like I was making it the Danny show. It was that I could go to work confidently, and I could get us out of trouble. I could do this. I could do that. And I think what still amazes me now was that I didn't know at the time I was about to work with Ed, and I went and worked with Ed, and all of a sudden I've got somebody saying to me, "No, do it like this," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And the brilliance of that is I responded to that positively. Like I enjoyed it. Like he said to me, it was a big difference between having my headroom like that or like my headroom
Yeah.
like that. And he was like,
Uh-huh.
no, give it more headroom. Like have fun with it. And and what I now know retrospectively, because it's like, so my daughter's 6, so 6 years ago, I didn't know that I was going to meet Ed, and all of a sudden somebody's just going to start pushing me and telling me to think out of the box and try this, do that. And I think like it's so easy to get to the point because you're the camera operator and you're at the sharp end of the stick. It's so easy to go into work and be like the smartest person in the room, purely because quite often you've worked more than a lot of directors. Some directors do
Yep.
one movie every 3 years. And so I've worked with one director where I kept doing every job with him, but what I realized, I was getting more and more experienced, and he wasn't necessarily getting more and more experienced. And I think with Ed, I was just like, wow, who is this person? And Ed's got a fantastic CV prior to meeting me, and he was just so clever, and he cares about every department, and he is fastidious about every department, and his work ethic is so incredible. And I think that's what made it for me, was to go onto this job and suddenly have this person go, right, do this, do that. And it was such an exciting place. It still is an exciting place to be, because, not every director is like that. Not every director is a joy to work with. Not every director wants to push creatively. And, um, and I think that was such a fantastic opportunity to get working with him. And I know that he completely changed my career and completely changed my abilities. Like, changed my abilities as an operator, made me grow. I recognize that more than anything. He made me grow and think outside the box, and it's like, oh, I'll always be grateful for that.
That's amazing. So you met him on Your Honor, the TV show here in the
No,
States?
On Patrick Melrose.
Sorry, you met him on
So,
that, and then he brought you on Your Honor here.
yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And then the
and then
next
when we
thing
were
was
All
All Quiet.
Quiet.
That's a ride right there.
Yeah,
That's
I mean
amazing.
Patrick Melrose is a true story, a really sad story, and basically it's about Benedict Cumberbatch plays Patrick Melrose, and I still have people now say to me, "God, I just watched it the other night. I didn't even know you did it." And
It's a TV show or it's a movie?
it's a TV show.
Oh, I'll have to check it out. I'll link to it also when this comes out. Patrick
I
Melrose.
mean,
Okay,
it's just Benedict is a tour de force. I've done
he's
Sherlock with
amazing.
him. And I did, and both times, like, I mean, he is the camera operator's dream, Benedict.
So
He, well, he knows there's a process. He's a big actor. He's got his ways, but he cares about the camera. And like on Sherlock, we would do a take, and quite often he would look over at me, and I'd be like, "Oh," like that, and he'd go, "I need another one." And obviously
because
nobody,
he knew you didn't have it. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and
That's
he knows if you don't have it, then they probably don't have it,
yep.
and nobody's ever going to say to Benedict, "You can't have another one." So that was on Sherlock, and then I worked with him again on Patrick Melrose, and he was with Ed, and he was playing a character that was so flawed. It was emotional, and it was hard. Some of it was hard to film, but interesting because you're playing it's a character centered to the story, center framed. He's in nearly every scene. It was a big 5 month commitment from him, and it was brilliant. I
Wow.
think it was a big jump up for me as an act an operator, and obviously I was with James, so there's a certain level of comfort because I've worked with James by this point for like 15 years,
Yeah.
and we just went into it 2 feet first, and every scene that we put into it, we put our heart and souls into, and just tried to think outside the box and make it bigger and better. And I think there's some
Why do
great
you say
scenes
it
in it.
was a big jump up for you as an operator? What aspect of it was the?
Just because I'd never done a 5 month job before, I'd never done something with I mean, he's Hollywood A-lister, if we say over here.
I
He's
see what you're
like,
saying. The
he's
level. Yeah. Yeah.
the level, like like an actor in his absolute prime. Um, and the responsibility as well. Like, we shot it nearly all single camera, and and you have to be responsible for that, don't you? You have to take out when you're an A camera operator. You have to take an ownership over a show and its filming, and there are so many things that we could sit here between you and I, and it's like people will say what makes a good operator, and you're like, yeah, but you like timing, the things on set where you have to say to the AD, in 3 shots time, I'm going to see video village. You need to start moving video village now. It's like all of those things where you say to production, hey, I'm worth my pay bucket because I can save you time, because I'm not just thinking about creatively. I'm not just thinking about panning and tilting. I'm also thinking, how do I make sure that all of those people talking over there are moved by the next shot?
Well,
And
and
I think,
ironically, the thing for me when you say that is also, even though that's not thinking about the art of what we do, in a way it is, because if I think ahead, it's going to give me more time to be able to finesse the things that I want to do, as opposed to scrambling at the last minute, whatever. So there's always that juggling, right? Of like trying to make sure that I mean, it's selfish in a way because you want as much time as you can to
do you
do
know
your
what?
job well.
You're absolutely right, and it's really interesting because I was chatting. I did a an open day with DOPs that wanted to talk to an operator. One of the female DOPs said,
What's an open day?
"Well, we like a masterclass, but we did it at a rental house,
Oh, I
and
see.
they came in and
Yeah.
they asked me and James questions about a DOP working with an operator,
Oh, that's great.
and one of the women said, and I'd never thought about it, but it's basically what you said, is actually you're buying yourself time. And
Yeah.
I understand what I want is I want, when I get on my shot, I want as much time to think about the background, to think about the plant pots and the clock faces. And actually, I'm moving Video Village 3 shots ahead of time for myself. And I'd never thought of it that way. And you've just said it, you've hit it on the head. It's like, I'm moving that stuff so that when I get there, I've got the maximum amount of time to rehearse.
Yeah.
You know, if I need to rehearse on the crane, I need 40 minutes to do that, not 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's what she said, you're buying yourself more time. And that is, I've always thought about it that I'm helping production, and actually I am helping myself.
Well,
So
it's both, right?
It's
You know.
both, yeah.
And I say it's selfish, but it's really not selfish, because the reason that I want that time is because I want to do a better job for production and for the director and for the actor. I don't want to have some actor, I don't want to have Benedict Cumberbatch giving some unbelievable, soliloquy, and I don't get it because I didn't have enough time to work out my move, or give it the best it can. So I think it's all of those things. So tell me about then working on, just because we've talked about it already, working on All Quiet. I mean, that must have just been, I can't even imagine that. It just seems like a massive, massive undertaking on all fronts.
I think something that's really interesting is when I just going back to Your Honor, I went out to New Orleans with Ed and James, and 3 weeks before we started filming, Ed was doing episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Your Honor. And the first 3 episodes for 3 weeks, we spent every single day going through every single scene, talking about the shots. Wow. And just me, James, and Ed at Ed's house. And then we might go off and look at a set or something. And then we would come back at 1 o'clock, and then we would carry on. And Ed would go, yeah, we're going to do it till scene 70 tonight. And then we'd do it till scene 70, and then we'd pick it up in the morning. And I think the big thing about All Quiet was Ed and James had shortlisted the movie in Berlin the year before. And they'd literally sat in COVID times in a hotel, and they'd gone through the script and they'd shortlisted it. And obviously James shortlisted it knowing about how me and him work and what we could do. And then when I started in the January of 2020, when I went out to Prague, they were like, here's the shot list. And I still have it now. I have the shot list from the first shot to the last shot. And they storyboarded all the big scenes. And it was quite interesting at the masterclass this year. I showed everybody the shot list and the description of for example, the first 3 shots of the movie, which were all done in one shot. If you read the description of what James and Ed said, and then look at the storyboard and then watch the shot, it's almost exactly that.
Was most of the movie that way when it finished? Was it mostly what they had seen? It's incredible. That's incredible. And I think
that it, Ed could sit here and tell you why he likes working that way, but I don't think it takes away from it. It doesn't take away from the creativity, because ultimately we shot a $20 million movie in 15 weeks. And what everybody wanted from every department was to try and make this film that was a small film, a big film. And I think that's what the shot list does, is like, you can adapt it if you want to, but if you live by it and you know that you're good enough. And I think we'd done it in Your Honor, or they'd done it in Your Honor, and we'd shot it, and then they did the same thing in All Quiet. And I think, it's really going back to what I was saying about trying to be the most the thinking you're the best in the room. Is like, it's so nice to go onto a job where somebody's telling you, this is what I want creatively. This is the one shot in the trenches. How can you execute that for me? How can you do that? And that's a different type of problem solving, and it's one that I responded to and really enjoyed. And I think that my son's called Indy because my favorite film's Raiders of the Lost Ark, and in lockdown in lockdown, I wrote an article for the ACO about the filming of Raiders because it was 40 years. And unfortunately, the camera operator's not alive anymore. His name's Chick Watterson, an English guy, did all the big movies. He did like The Italian Job. He always worked with Dougie Slocum. And
Oh, wow.
Chick and Dougie kind of remind me a little bit of me and James. They had a massive slate of films together. And I ended up speaking to Robin Vigeon a lot, Robin Vigeon was the focus puller on Main Unit. And then he got me in contact with a guy called David Worley, who did the operating on the second unit. And basically, Spielberg very famously storyboarded and shotlisted the whole movie.
Yeah.
And very famously, the second unit was shot before for the car chase at the end, the truck chase. All the second unit stuff was done before Spielberg got out there. I think they shot for like 10 days. So all the stuff, obviously, just to explain to people who don't know, all the second unit stuff was all the stuff where Harrison Ford's not in it. I think, does that mean Spielberg wasn't involved? Of course not. He had the overall look of the film in his head. He storyboarded it all. He said, "I want this. This is what I want." And you look at the storyboards, which I've seen, and they're literally the shots in the film. And then when Harrison, and I think it's interesting because when you hear Spielberg talk about Raiders, he sees it as a little film that they managed to get off the ground with no money, and and I'm like, is it? But but that's the way they look at it, and I think it's the same thing, right? It's like you can apply that logic to every job since then. For me, it's like you realize prep is so important. And
it's unbelievable.
I think a lot of people don't do prep. And I think prep is something new to me, in all honesty, from working with Ed. And, now I go in and I know every day, like on All Quiet, we had a shot list for the whole movie, and every single shot, I knew whether I was on the crane, I knew whether I was handheld, I knew whether I was on the Stabileye, which and I've still got it, and I looked through it, and it was exactly right. And so we would go.
That's amazing.
And ultimately, what that did is the same thing. Is it bought me time. Like I knew that I needed to get the crane from one side of the battlefield to the other, and that would take 3 hours. So I needed the crane in the morning. So then I would go to the first AD and say, "Hey, I need to do this, but does that impact that?" And then he'd go, "Yeah, it does." So then I'd have to go to Ed and say, "Ed, if we're going to use the crane here, I need to get the crane there." And the Ed would be like, "Fine, I'll do this," and he'd adapt it. And it's like, and that's the same thing. It's like, I think if I can, apart from being creative, I think the one thing that Ed has drummed into me is prep. And I always remember doing a Zoom, and behind me in my flat in Prague, I had all the visual boards on the wall, all the trench plans and all the shot lists. Everything was on the wall, and I would get up in the morning and I'd stare at it, and I'd be like, right, and I knew it inside out. I still know it inside out now, and it's just how much I wanted it, how much I wanted the job to do well. And I think that you just realize, I think when you're younger and you're starting out and you're not so experienced, you just realize you can cut corners and do all of that. And some people that might work for their whole lives, but you then realize that actually there is so much more to the job of an operator that is just sitting behind the camera. It's the whole melee of knowing the script inside out and knowing the actors and being a nice person and having the prep and I think that it kind of that all came to like fruition on All Quiet, that we were in a position where we could work really well with the camera. And
it's an amazing piece of filmmaking. I mean, the work that you guys did was incredible, and how great that you both got nods from so many different organizations and big organizations for your work, and that the two of you finally sort of like got to that point where you peaked. Not that you peaked, that it's over, but that you hit that spot together. It's wonderful. You told me something. I don't know what we did you and I were talking. Oh, you and I were talking on an SOC roundtable or something like that. But we were talking on some video, and I vaguely remember we were supposed to be interviewed, but you and I just spent the whole time talking to each other, and they let us
Yeah.
go, which I kind of felt badly about. But I whatever. But I remember you telling me that, which hadn't occurred to me, is that the movie's in German and that you don't understand German, and so that you really, like, quote unquote, didn't understand the dialogue, and yet you're doing all these camera moves and whatever. How do you achieve that?
So what I learned straight up, the first scene that we did where they spoke German, we were at the field hospital, and they arrived on the car, and the doctor's like shuffling them in, and then all the men are in the back of the boys, not men, all the boys are in the back of the truck, and I was like, holy shit, have I got myself in trouble here? Because I really don't
Had
understand
you
what they're
not thought
saying.
about it before then?
Yeah, I'd even gone and had German lessons, and I
Oh,
thought
okay, but
I'm never going to learn German. I had one lesson with her, and I thought this is a waste of my time, an absolute waste of my time. So I stopped. And the general was stood up in the back of the truck, and he was just going, "Cumsy, cumsy, cumsy," like that, which is like, come on, get out, get out. And I realized then my only way that it was going to work was I just had to listen to words that stood out, and I would have to understand when those words were coming in relation to another word. And so basically I was just listening to sounds. And then the other thing that goes back to I guess my documentary making is I was just looking at people the whole time, and actors are kind of like poker players in that they all have these little tells, and
yeah,
I could sense when they were going to move, or going to sense when they were going to do something, because I knew when they puts the matchbox down, it's a beat, and then he's going to stand, so I have to be ready at that point. And
it's incredible.
so I got into that, and what's really interesting is I don't know whether it's a bad habit, but I've stopped listening to. I've actually stopped listening. So I then went on and did Tar, and then I've just been doing Star Wars, and I didn't even have any cams. I've just got my. I mean, you'd probably shoot me at film school, but in a weird way, it feels like it's a bit more organic because I'm reacting to body movement, and I'm like, you know, it's the best way I could describe it, which I know you're going to know really well, is when you've got the steady cam on and you're static, and you're either going to have to start moving backwards or forwards. There's a sense in there somewhere that the actor's going to start walking, and there's a millionth of a second that you preempt that and you start walking before they do, and you can't teach that. That is just experience, and that little movement of going, right, I need to start walking, that's in there somewhere with not being able to speak German. And so I knew, I was like, okay, you're gonna start going now. I need to go. So that was kind of how I got over that hurdle.
That's amazing. But it's funny that you're saying about wearing cans, because I actually generally don't wear cans either. The only time I'll wear cans is if I'm on wheels on a remote head, and they're 200 yards away from me or something like that. I will, because I want to hear what's going on. But invariably, I hear what I hear, and I go mostly off of, like you said, body language, because most actors, I find, you can tell what they're doing and what they're saying and whatever. But I hadn't thought till you said that. Now, the question that I have, though, is the script that you had, was the script in English so that you could, I mean, you could learn the script, and I mean, the script wasn't in German, was it?
I had the English script,
Okay,
but it was just pointless, really. Like,
sure, but I mean, at least you understood the story of the
I
scene
I
and
knew the
whatever. But
story,
yeah,
but it
yeah,
was,
that's incredible.
it was pretty pointless. Yeah. I was going to just quickly describe, like, the main shot at the beginning of the movie. Um, it was three shots. We had gone backwards and forwards about how we were going to do it. We had tested and tested and tested, and we didn't know whether we were going to do it on a crane, a wire cam, a drone, all of these things. And then obviously we settled on the stable eye, and we'd done this test in Ari, with a young lad with a flag arm as a gun, and I had felt that, and I still feel, if ever you're going to test a piece of equipment, doesn't matter what it is, test it when it's going at its absolute slowest, because I think that everything that you get, it doesn't matter what you get on the market, if you're panning it around and you're going up and down really fast or whatever, it always looks great. Like, it always looks good. What you need to do is you need to test what it does when it's really, really slow. And so I tested the Stabilizer Ari, and I just got the soldier to walk really, really slowly. And then suddenly he would drop down and the camera would jib down and it'd have to come to a stop. And then I did this move, which we would never do, Ed would never do, but I did the move where I was behind him and he stayed static and the Stabilizer went round in front of him. And Ed would never do that kind of move because it's unprompted. But what I wanted to show was, I wanted to say, well, look, this is what it can do when the subject's static and the camera's moving. And then we went back to Germany and to Prague, sorry, and we were there and we watched it in a big screen there, and it looked incredible. And so I think that will always be my top bit of advice, is always test something. Like, don't throw it. Like, you always see people throwing cameras around, and it's like that's the time where it looks good. And so then we knew we were going to do the film on the Stabilizer, and we prepped the big opening shot. And I had these glorious storyboards, and we stood there on a Sunday with the trench with nobody there. And we had done this on Patrick Melrose. There's a big Steadicam shot in Patrick Melrose, which I'm really, really proud of. It's like a step off of a crane. It's like 8 minutes long. And
Wow.
and the same process that we'd done on Patrick Melrose, we did on All Quiet. We stood there with nobody there, the three of us and Benedict the First. And we talked it through, and I said, these are the things I can do. And these are the things that are going to be tricky, and these are the problems I'm going to have, and these are the bits that are going to take care of themselves. And I've realised from doing the shot in tar and stuff that I've started to work out that the best way of breaking down a shot is to just go to the tricky bits. And I will always instantly know, and this is because of experience, I'll always instantly know the bits that are going to be tricky. And I go, right, so I'll identify the 4 sticking points in the shot, which I did. What the one that I've heard Ed talk about so much is the young lad comes out of the trench, and I had to buy myself some time getting the camera off of the crane because it had hooked onto the crane by now. And I just said to Ed, can you put in an explosion? So Ed put in an explosion, the kid dropped on the floor, and at that point the camera was unhooked from the crane. And then that says to me straight away, well, that reminds me of my Steadicam course in Philadelphia, because Larry told me the time he couldn't get the camera around in Goodfellas, so he got one of the SAs to do something. Oh, it may have even been Ray Liotta. He got somebody to do something in the kitchen, which allowed him to go round him. And he said,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah. It may have even been when he's coming down the stairs, he couldn't get quite fast enough. So he said to Ray, "Is there a reason you would stop?" And he goes, "Yeah, why don't I turn back and give this guy a 20 because then I'm facing you, and it's flawless. It seems like it's always there, but it's because of physics." Yeah, yeah.
So that's the same thing. The explosion at the top of the trench is there, and and it's like, so I learned that in 2004, and now I'm shooting a movie in 2020. And I still think of those moments where I've been taught that by somebody, and so we planned it like that, and by this point we haven't even got a camera on, and then we came down and we just had the stunt team and the core actors, and we did a rehearsal, and basically just between us just ironed out all the problems, and we just put more explosions in, and just went through it over and over again. And I worked out the height of the camera, and I worked out the speed I needed to pan as the camera went round the corner in the trench, because at some point you have to let go and just hope the grip's going to get to the center of the trench and to stop the back pan on the camera. And it's like, I just think that with all those big shots in the movie, by the time we'd come to them, they were so rehearsed and thought out that it was just a point of having to do it. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was really, really enjoyable. And
that opening shot from that movie is, I mean, if ever there's an opening shot that sets the tone, that opening shot is incredible. And I just want to mention for anybody who's heard you say it a couple of times, because I didn't know it originally until I heard about it a while ago. The Stabilize, basically, it's a 3-axis gimbal that unfortunately can't be used in the United States because of some, I think it's some some patent law or something. I don't know. There's some reason you can't have it in the United States. So all of us operators in the United States who have heard of it know that there's this thing out there that we all want to use that we can't. And then we see stuff like this, and they used it all over 1917 as well. It sounds like an amazing piece of equipment.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's lightweight, and it was absolutely flawless. It was just, I mean, I honestly can't tell you, I can't tell you what I would have done if we hadn't used it. A really good story is we were filming at night. We were filming on the LF, but at night we were filming on the Venice, and the Steadicam was so heavy. I put the Venice on the Steadicam, and I basically just couldn't walk through the mud. Like, I couldn't even move
because of the mud. Of course, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
You couldn't lift your legs up. I couldn't lift my legs up fast enough to move. And then the Stabilize couldn't take the weight of the Venice with the lenses. So we had to use the LF on the Stabilize so the 2 grips could carry it. And James was like, there's just no light. There's like, you know, the Venice can see the dark, can't it? And like, that shot was dictated purely by the fact that we couldn't do it on Steadicam. And it's like, I really don't know. I don't know what we would have done on that movie if we hadn't have had the Stabilize. I will never know, but it added so much. It added so much to the production value, and got us so much, such a visual language to it, and still managed to keep Ed's style of trying to least not move the camera as much as possible. And I think, I think it's got a good mixture of handheld in it. Dolly work.
Let me ask you a question about that to watch that movie, the word the landscape is such a character, like the mud and the rain, and when they're in the trenches and it's like up to their chests and whatever. And it seems like a lot of the times you were in the midst of that as well. And I'm wondering, how much did that inform your operating? I mean, does it become a psychological part of like the fact that you're in the trenches literally and with them, and in the mud with them? Does it affect the way that you tell that story?
I think that James always laughs because he's probably heard the story 1,000 times, but I think that I felt to be a bit spiritual about it. I felt it was the first time that I'd gone through the same as the actor. And I felt that we were living and breathing the movie together, me and Felix. I was only most of the time like 5 foot away from him, or so close to him at all points. And I think that it did dictate it, because I think that it came from an emotion inside of me. And I've heard Ed say the story quite a few times about when he killed the French soldier. Ed doesn't like the Technicrane, and I had the Technicrane there with a bungee holding the Venice so I could use it in handheld, and then each scene was 8 minutes long, and basically I just had the camera rigged with a monitor, and then if I needed to come up, they would jib the crane up, or if I needed to go right, they would bring the arm in and out, and the grip was just watching where I wanted the camera and trying to keep the center of gravity on the camera the same. And I mean, I it was like handheld, and I just felt the scene, and it was just sad, and I was like crying, and Ed was like, "What's that noise?" And it was like, it's Danny
Oh
crying,
my
and
gosh.
James laughs about it because he's heard it so many times, and I think
Wow.
I think when you've grown up in a country where like my granddad fought in the Second World War, and you you've grown up, and the First and Second World War are not ancient history; they're modern history, and
Yeah.
and they're so important to you that you then go out and you just realize these kids were kids, and then you're sat there portraying that, and it's just nonsensical, like. And I've seen lots of comments about All Quiet, but there's nothing in it that's meant to glorify it. It's just meant to show. I mean, it's mad what's going on in the world at the moment, and I think the whole point about it is there's a reason this film has been made 3 times, and there's a reason what the story is about, and the story is about that it's just a cycle, and unfortunately, it's not a cycle that looks like it's ever going to get broken, and I think that was so ingrained in everybody, and I think that my emotions were on the edge for the whole film, and it was a real struggle. And I look back at it now, and I'm just like, God, I feel like I left a bit of me out there. I think as a whole, I've always thought this. I think when you're a camera operator, you give a bit to each of your job in your lifespan, and sometimes you give it your all, and sometimes you give it 80%. But there's a little bit of you that you give to your job, and you can look back at that time and go, oh, that was when my first kid was born, or that's when my dad died, or X, Y, and Z, and they're little chinks in your history as an operator. And I think with All Quiet, because of the subject matter, you it was such a difficult one, and it was something that I spoke to Mitch about it, because obviously Saving Private Ryan, and he said the same thing. It's like, it's just such a mad subject to as a camera operator, to be at the front filming that with everything behind you, and you're just seeing war and death and destruction. It's gonna take a piece of you, I think.
Well, there's got to be something about the fact that both Saving Private Ryan and this are two great examples of the fact that it's so realistic and so well done. And you have to be sitting there thinking, this is horrible, and it's not even anywhere near as horrible as what it actually have been. And I would have trouble comprehending just this, I mean, there's
Yeah.
got to be sort of all of that involved. It's an amazing story. You mentioned Tar. I want to ask you about working with Todd Field, because that must have been an unbelievable experience. It's not an easy movie to watch, but it's an exceptional movie. um, uh, Accomplishment.
I think Todd. I was fortunate to get recommended to go and work with the DOP, Florian Hofmeister from Ed, who I'd done All Quiet with. So um, I'd heard of Todd, but I'd obviously never met him, and I went out there to do the movie in Berlin, and I just had 2 months off after All Quiet, so the two films were like poles apart, and yet
Yeah.
the directors have a kind of similar temperament, and are both creative in their own ways, and it was just an amazing experience to go onto a job where he just didn't want to move the camera, and I could have been frustrated by that. But I think going back to what I was saying earlier is like, I think the joy of being a camera operator is accepting the fact that you're dipping in and out of other people's productions. You know, when I went onto Star Wars, I didn't think that I was really in space. Like, I'm going onto a job where I've done a war movie, and now I'm doing a space movie, and I'm the one that's going between these productions, and so I have to buy into. I know that on Star Wars, the producer director Leslie, she'd been working on that for 6 years, so she had this whole preconceived notion of how this thing was going to be structured and shot. long before I even knew it was a production. And, you know, I can't sit and tell you about Todd's methodology, but I know that he wrote that script for Kate. And he said that he'd written the script for Kate for her to be the center character in the movie. And then they've hired me as an operator. So I think, who am I to sit there and start being like, hey, it's way better if you do this. And he said to me he doesn't want to move the camera. So I thought, okay, well, if he doesn't want to move the camera, I will make each shot the best I can make it. And you know, the thing that we do as operators, which we have to do, is we look at the background and we work with the art director and we say, hey, I don't like that, I don't like that, move this, move that. And that's what I spent my time doing. I spent my time composing, hopefully, what people think is beautiful frames. And sometimes we moved the camera and sometimes we didn't move the camera. But I certainly didn't feel frustrated by that, because I felt like, okay, my job is to facilitate making the camera work the way you want it to work. And
Yeah.
and what ultimately, I don't feel when you watch the movie, like, it doesn't stand out negatively that the camera doesn't move. It's just like you're watching this brilliant actor who's just fantastic as a character, and I love it. It's one of my favorite things I've done.
It feels right. I mean, like I said, it's a tough movie to watch, but it's an exquisitely photographed movie. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention there's one scene in there where she is teaching a class in like what is it, like a concert hall sort of, or a lecture hall or something like that, that is just this impossibly long shot that you did it's so incredible because it actually does have a fair amount of movement, but all the movement is dictated by her, and it doesn't feel that way. And it's one single shot, and yet it feels like it's complete with coverage. It feels, I mean, it is just an absolute incredible shot. I won't ask you to go into it because without seeing it, it's sort of pointless. But I would say that anybody who's watching this, who's listening to this, should watch Tar and watch that movie, because it's an education in filmmaking. That scene is so specific and so subtle, and again, like you said, it's all about her at the end of the day. It's incredible.
I think what is interesting for me, that shot, is, I'm sitting here and talking to you about the structure of my career, and I feel like I'd just come off of All Quiet, and I'd worked with this gimbal, and I had an understanding of working with grips, where I'm so used to being on the Steadicam, where I'm the one in control of how the camera moves, and I can breathe with an actor, and if I want to adjust back or whatever, I'm in complete control of that. And much in the same way as when you work with a grip on the crane, like, sometimes they won't think about breathing with the actors or moving the crane. They're always waiting for instruction. And I think the brilliant thing about All Quiet was I really got my head around working with somebody and working with something different. And the thing about that shot in Tar, it just shows you that there are a million ways to get into the film industry, and there is a million ways to become a camera operator. And it's very easy for me to say when I'm 45 and I've had a year where I've won awards. But the thing that I can retrospectively look at is there is no account for just working your way at your pace where you're doing it well. And if I hadn't have done All Quiet, I wouldn't have been able to do that shot in Tar, because I hadn't worked with the gimbal in that way before, and I certainly hadn't worked at that level. And the level that Todd required me to work at to do a 14-minute scene with Kate Blanchett, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to operate the wheels, and I wouldn't have been able to have the structure to say to my grips, you need to do this and you need to do that. And I think it's a really good point that I think it's so, when you're younger, you want it all now. I want to be a really big camera operator, and I want to be on the big jobs, and I want to be on the best jobs. And it's like, and the one thing I think that I've hopefully done well that I can relate to other people is I've done it in a way that I felt like I've I've taken the next step, and every job subsequently, hopefully, has always been slightly different or bigger than my last job. And I think that has led me in good stead, because I feel like I've always learned, and I'm not standing still, and I'm doing varied things. And I do see a tendency, especially now, where people can just jump on a film, whether you're filming on an iPhone or whatever. People do try and rush. And in the olden days, there was the people used to say, "Oh, you can't get into being a camera operator because we don't have any money, and it's an elite job." And I actually think that you can discount that now and go, well, actually, you do have to work your way up, but work your way up at a sensible speed. And I know in the last year a few people that have been fired, and I've actually said to them, "Yeah, but why did you take that job? Like, you weren't good enough to do that job." And they're like, "What?" And it's like, the story that I always tell people is, I was down in the basement of this job, and I was doing a camera on a movie, and I got up, and I had a phone call from my agent, and they were like, "Oh, we want to know if you can do Steadicam for 2 weeks with Kenneth Branagh on Beauty and the Beast. It's the big party scene. They want a Steadicam operator." And I was like, "No way. Like, just no way." I was like, "I'm not doing that." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Well, I know that he's quite hard to work for because he's Kenneth Branagh. And I just don't have the confidence. Like, I don't have the confidence to go in with a group of people. I mean, this isn't even long ago. This is like 2014, maybe 13. I was like, I don't have the confidence to go in on 35 mil and do 2 weeks of Steadicam with Kenneth Branagh." And I think 6 years later, I'm doing a movie with Kate Blanchett, and I know exactly what I'm doing. And I think that's the important thing about being a camera operator, is there are lots of good operators and there are lots of bad operators. But I think the operators that end up doing really, really well are the ones that understand the process of earning your stripes. And that's not to hold anyone back, but it's like, I look at all those films I did with James in 2008 and 2010, and it's like I was earning my stripes, and I was making my mistakes. And it's hard to not think full circle about how did I get where I am when I'm sat here talking to somebody like you. But it's that is it. It's like all of a sudden I'm on a film with Todd Field, and he's like, "Yeah, I need to do this big long shot," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I can do that. I can do that for
Yeah.
you." And I think
Well, and
that's
that,
the positive mindset, isn't it?
yeah, and that shot, because it is a very slow shot. I was thinking of that when you were talking about testing out the stable eye for not for All Quiet. It is that shot wouldn't have worked if you couldn't do those slow moves like you were talking about, and it's an excellent point of trying to figure out a piece of equipment. Well, listen, this has been just a wealth of information, and it's always a blast to talk to you and hear these stories. You've worked on so many amazing things, and you've done such great work. It's kind of cool to me to think that we just met last year, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's this incredible operator I'm not even aware of," which makes me wonder how many other people out there are so much better than I am. Uh,
Loads,
but
loads.
that's everybody pretty much at this point. But I thank you, and I'll leave you with the question that I leave everybody, which is someone getting into the business, an operator moving up, B camera to A camera, something like that, or you talking to yourself, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. What advice on success in this business would you give to any of these people?
I've always said the same thing, so I can tell you straight away, just be a nice person. People always want to work with nice people, and I can tell you the amount of people that I've not asked back because I don't like them is huge, because they might have been nasty to the first AC or the trainee or whatever. But it's like people just want to work with nice people, like, and it's like, and I go out of my way to be like that. And I will go in in the morning, and I'll go and shake the trainee's hand and say good morning. And if I've done a really hard shot at the end of the day on the crane, I'll go and shake the grip's hand and the guy pushing the crane's hand and say, hey, thanks for making that possible. You know, I think that's the biggest tip is that people can forgive bad camera operating if you're a nice person, but if you're an idiot, they'll be like, yeah, he's rubbish. and it sounds so simple, but it's so important because people just want to work with nice people. And I think especially in this culture at the moment where people are like, oh yeah, cancel culture, it's like you just gotta get on there and get on with everybody. And I think it's such an important part of my job. And also the reason it's an important part of your job is because everybody gravitates towards the camera because it's in front of the actor. And so quite often you'll be sat at the camera and the director and the DOP are talking over the top of you. And if you're there getting in the way and saying, why are we on the 35 mil? We should be on the 50 mil all the time. The DOP's like, hang on, I want to talk to the director, and you're trying to go 15 mil tighter or whatever. I think so. It's so important, and it's like people just want to work with nice people, and I hope somewhere in the world somebody would say that I am nice to work with. And I think that's what I'd say.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We'll be back soon with another great episode. Don't forget to check us out on theop.io for all sorts of information on operating and storytelling. So thanks for listening and have a great day.